Welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast. This is Will Baggett, Chief Development Officer at Emerging Executives, serving rising leaders in college athletics and beyond. Is your personal brand a reflection of your leadership potential? Well, look no further than our Executive Image Workshop, which has helped thousands master the art of professional presence, and we can do the same for your staff and student athletes. For more information, visit us on the web at www.execimage.org.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at OneQLeadership. Our guest today is Greg Burke. Greg is the Director of Athletics at Northwestern State University. Greetings, Greg. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Glad to be here.
I am glad you're here, too. Really appreciate how you always endorse me and Will's book, The Blueprint for a Successful Career. Thank you very much for doing that for us.
You bet. I've read it more than once.
Appreciate that. Now, you've been the athletics director there at Northwestern State for roughly 24, 25 years, right?
In my 24th right now.
In your 24th, right? And you've been in college athletics a lot longer.
I graduated from the University of Mount Union in 1978, and my first job was as a sports information director at Hiram College, very, very similar D3 liberal arts school, and I've worked in higher ed ever since July of 1978, so do the math.
41 years. I'm 41 actually myself. I was born in 1978, so you're a veteran in the profession, elephant in the profession.
That's right.
I have you on here to talk about just that, right? You've been in the game for a long time. You've seen the ups and downs of the athletics industry, the growth of the Southland Conference. You've seen a number of people who worked for and with you and were actually athletes during your time there to go on to become athletic directors and head coaches at a number of different institutions. I wonder, when you think back over your career, were there specific inflection points that helped prepare you as a leader early when you first started and then really recently that you can think of?
I think when you've been at it as long as I have, I don't think there's one inflection point. I mean, I look back, speaking of Hiram College, and I think I've been blessed to have some very good people who have inspired and motivated and pushed me. I mean, I'll go back to the football coach at Hiram College at the time I was there, Joe Malmaser. And Joe Malmaser later was the athletic director at Youngstown State. He's the guy that hired Jim Tressel at Youngstown State, and we all know how that worked out for them and then for Ohio State as well. But Joe's brother taught in the master's program at Kent State in sports administration, and the long story really short is he basically picked me up and took me down to have breakfast with his brother.
Oh, wow.
To get me into the master's program. I did it part-time. I had obviously the full-time job at Hiram, but that led to an internship here, a 9-month internship with Tynes Hildebrand, and he was a legendary basketball coach here, turned AD, and he started to basically pluck interns out of these Midwest, the sports administration programs in the Midwest, realizing, like me, you got to do an internship somewhere, and he started to reach out. My advisor was a guy named Carl Schreibman at Kent State, and he had a guy the year before me that came down here and did a 9-month internship, and that led to me getting hired here full-time. My first go-around, I like to say it's my first tour of duty here, and I worked for Coach Hildebrand for 7 years, and then when he retired, I left, went to Akron, and one of my mentors there, Mike Bobinski, is now the AD at Purdue. And I really tried to watch how Mike handled his business, and then when Coach Hildebrand retired, I got the chance to come back here in '96, and I really was blessed to have some mentors, some role models like that. When you've been in the business 41 and a half years like me, you've been an AD for 23 and a half years, you've got to develop a little bit of your own inflection point. I mean, I think, as you know, there's a lot of movement in college athletics. Coaches go somewhere, they're successful, they go somewhere else, they're successful, they move and bounce. And that's all well and good. I mean, then there's folks like me. Our men's basketball coach has been here since '99. Our softball coach has been here since '08. So it kind of works both ways. But I think you've got that inflection point. If you stay somewhere, you've got to make sure you stay motivated. You've got to hit the reset button. And I think part of that involves putting people around you who keep you motivated, good young people. And I've got a good staff in that way. I've got good coaches. I also think as a professional, it's very important for me to stay in tune. I may not be the most I'm not the most untech savvy person, but I may not be the most tech savvy person, but I need to know what needs to be done and have somebody that can do it. because I think sometimes it's harder to stay at a place for a long period of time, because you can come in and have a lot of success, but I mean, boy, things happen. Coaches leave, you get bad breaks, whatever, and it's hard. And there's hills and there's valleys, there's ebb and there's flow, and I think that I've got a lot of respect for coaches and administrators that stay at the same place for a long time, and even hit some rough patches and come out of them, because I think that that speaks to resolve, and it speaks to perseverance, and just basically continuing to refresh yourself as a professional. So I guess that's kind of a double answer to your question about the inflection points. It started early for me, but then as I've moved along in my career, I think it's been very important to keep hitting that reset button.
Right, and trying to create your own. You mentioned your staff, right? You got people who have been with you for a long time, and you got people who have been with you for not as long. I wonder, when you talk about, I guess, multi-generational staff, if that's how we'll call it, when you talk about young folks and when you talk about people who have been around, you talk about feedback and how important feedback is important. I mean, is when you talk about leading and managing people. And feedback works in two ways, right? You either talk about people want to know that their voice is heard and potentially useful, but they also want to know how they're doing at the roles that they've been hired to do. Talk to me about how you address feedback with somebody who's been there since '99, like Coach you mentioned, or somebody who you hired 2 or 3 years ago. Tell me how your process works in giving people feedback in both of those type of directions.
Well, I'll start by telling you, it's interesting you asked that question, because we had our faculty institutes for spring semester a couple of days ago, and it's that mainly, usually that is something that, and we always see it as staff and administrators on campus, but it's mainly a faculty oriented session. But I noticed when they advertised it back around Thanksgiving that the guest speaker for the Faculty Institute for spring semester was somebody who was going to come in and talk about generational differences. From I'm one of those guys that people on Twitter like to say, okay, boomer. That's me.
Right.
And then you go all the way through, generation, the millennials and X, and now you got Z. And it really was very helpful for me. And I noticed that some of our I put it out to our department, because just like you're asking me about, you've got coaches that have been, the guy who's been here since '99 is about my age, and he's got first of all young coaches, and then he's got younger players. And so I think you've got to be able to let people see you for who you are. I've always tried to maintain a very open door policy, which sometimes comes back to bite me when I'm not getting things done, and I've got to stay late, and I got to explain to my wife when I go home, or got to answer the question, why didn't you do that during the day? But I think it's important to focus, to think a little bit about yourself. I think when you were their age, especially the younger ones, to think about yourself when you were their age, and what was important to you, what made a difference for you, and then maybe what did you wish had been done for you, or that maybe wasn't, and you can do it, especially for the younger folks on the staff. I mean, I think about I was the young gun in the Southland Conference Athletic Directors meeting room when I first started. I remember Mike Alden, who used to be at Missouri. Mike and I started together. He was at then Southwest Texas, and we were the young guys in the room asking the questions. And I think also part of the question you're asking, I think it's important for them to see somebody who's been in the business as long as I have, to not come across as somebody who has all the answers.
Being willing to learn is one of the most important things, I think, in life, period, right? Beyond just athletics.
Yeah, I saw this quote in y'all's book. What was it? You will be surprised at what you didn't know you didn't know.
Yeah, exactly.
And the minute you think you know it all, you'll be really, really surprised. And so I think, to your question about feedback and insight with the people, I mean, I'm the guy. I've got the listserv of the department, and of course there's been a lot of stuff out there lately about the Fair Play Act with the NCAA, and I don't forward at all. But I make sure that, and I know that coaches get in their zone, and they should. The main zone is we got to win ball games, but that's the 5,000 foot view. But the 50,000 foot view, as you work in college athletics, and the Fair Play Act is a big deal. So I make sure that to provide insight for them, I send them articles. I see stuff on Twitter. I see stuff on the NACDA Daily Review and some other of those publications online that you get, and I'll take those articles and I'll send them. And I hope they read them. I mean, it doesn't take that long. I always tell coaches, if you don't read it now, stick it on your laptop or keep it on your phone, and when you get on the bus for 2 or 3 hour bus ride, make yourself a better professional.
I'd imagine with the experience you have, obviously coaches learn from other coaches, but there has to be, I'd imagine there's an aspect of them coming to pick your brain about, hey, what is this coming down the pipe? When should I be worried about it? Should I need to change what I'm doing? Tell me about that part in terms of, you mentioned the open door policy, people picking your brain on just the wealth of experience you have and leading and direction in terms of leadership.
Well, I think that every one of us, I mean, me to coaches and staff, but we've got head coaches to their assistants. I've got associate ADs to their staff, I think, and then all of us to our student athletes. I think that we all have a daily obligation or responsibility to help mentor and guide and direct those people. I mean, in my case, even, that head coach has been here since 1999, but then we hired a married couple who barely are 30 years old to be our co-head women's soccer coaches 2 years ago. And I remember when they interviewed, and Jess and Anna Job did a fantastic job this year. I'll give them a quick plug with 23 freshmen and sophomores. They went to the conference championship match and won and had the best season we've had in soccer since 2005. But I remember Anna when they interviewed, and you talk about the fact that, hey, you're going to be first-time head coaches. How are you going to handle that? And Anna has said it then, and she said it over and over. We will continue to be learners, and I think that's what you want in your people, whether it's the young coaches and staff or the ones that have been here. I try to give them every opportunity to be learners, and then of course they've got to want to be learners as well. But we have 3 department meetings in the fall and 3 department meetings in the spring, and we feed them little carrots. We feed them a free lunch, and some of that agenda consists of the typical reminders, whether it's your compliance stuff or your academic stuff. But I always try to put something on that agenda that relates to something that's going on in the industry of intercollegiate athletics, and it is an industry, it's a business. And once again, I know their 5,000-foot view is their field or their arena, but you got to widen that 50,000-foot view. There's a lot more to it. You mentioned earlier the changes that have gone on, whether it's this, the Fair Play Act or all the social media stuff. In the last 4 to 5 years, the NCAA Sports Science Institute, with everything ranging from mental health to concussions, those kind of things, those are all, and most people don't think about that kind of stuff when they go to a ball game, don't have to realize that those are the things that are also very important to how we function day in and day out. But those are things that if Greg Burke is the only person in the Northwestern State Athletic Department that's tracking on those, we're not a very good department.
Right. I'd imagine you would probably feel like you were doing them a disservice if you didn't provide them information about the 50,000-foot level in terms of college athletics.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, once again, the man who hired me here, Dr. Randy Webb, was the president for 18 years at Northwestern State, and Dr. Webb had a sign, I guess it's the old nameplate, but instead of a nameplate that said Randy Webb, his nameplate said, "I am responsible." And the message was, ultimately, it doesn't matter if it's the physical plant, the athletic department, the faculty, the buck stops at that desk. And I think as an athletic director, you've got to have that attitude. And I feel fortunate that when I go to Southern Conference meetings, as an example, I will come back and I will share information with coaches that we discussed, or with my business manager, here's some updated numbers and things like that. And because when you do that, now you, in my opinion, you enhance the level of engagement on their part.
All right, I agree with that. I'll ask one final question here. We talk about developing good habits, right? And some habits you stick with, some habits change. I wonder, early on, were there habits you developed that worked for you when you were younger, but you've had to break them over time? And then the second part to the question is, are there habits you've recently developed that help you now as you've become a tenured athletic director?
Well, I think it's an old-fashioned thing, but I don't think anything is more important than having work ethic. And I come by that really naturally. I had a dad who was a high school teacher for his whole career, and always had another job while he was teaching during the school year. And then in the summer, when you had the opportunity to, as a teacher, to basically be home and your check would come in, he always had a summer job. And I had a mom who who within the first year had the first of 4 children and worked extremely hard inside the home, and also was extremely involved in our community back in Alliance, Ohio. And so I learned very quickly that if you're not afraid of hard work, you can accomplish a lot. I mean, sometimes the old saying, you've got to work smart and not necessarily hard, but sometimes feel like the people that have said that quote are people that don't want to work hard.
Yeah, I agree with that. Right. Yeah. Greg, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast.
Well, I enjoy it. Like you said, I've been working in college athletics for 41 and a half years, and I guess before I forget, I was going to say this, but as much as the landscape has changed and there's a lot of challenges and things of that nature, the constant is still the focus on the student athletes. It's the best part of my job. I tell a recruit that when I meet with them. I said, I was here in 1985 as an intern, and I'll say an athlete that was here in 1985, it's 2020. How old do you think they are? First of all, I test their math skills, and usually they're not very good. But look, they're in their mid-50s, and it's one of the best parts of my job, and I tell them that. And I tell them, look, I look around our department, our head baseball coach, our head track coach, our associate AD, and right on down the line, they were student athletes here. They sat at the table in my office just like a recruit did, and now Bobby Barbier is in charge of our baseball program. And Mike Hummerman is in charge of our track program and had a national champion long jumper last year, female, Jasmine Steele, and she's back again this year. She's going to try to go get it again. But I tell them that it's the best part of my job is really watching these young people come through here and then seeing where they go and staying in touch with them.
Which is an excellent part of relationships, right? Excellent information, Greg. That was Greg Burke. He's the Director of Athletics at Northwestern State University. Of course, he's been there for 24 years in that role. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.